Thank you, Joan, and thank you to the League of Women Voters and also to the college for hosting this event and giving us this opportunity. And thank you to Representative Turner for your distinguished service and your commitment to this community and your endorsement of my candidacy. I'm a progressive, independent Democrat whose education, professional experience, public service experience, and deep-rooted ties to this community has prepared me to be your next state representative. I'm ready to hit the ground running, and I ask for your vote on November 4th. I was raised on the Cape, I went to Nauset, and that prepared me to then attend Deerfield Academy. From there, I went to the College of the Holy Cross, and I received a full scholarship to play basketball, and I was the captain my senior year of that team, for that team. Then I went on to law school at New England School of Law in Boston. I knew when I was at Holy Cross that I wanted to serve people. The mantra at that school is men and women for others, and that really resonated with me. And the law was the avenue that I chose to pursue. And I really credit the education at Nauset for giving me the foundation to really reach my goals in life. And my goal here is to give that same opportunity to the children in this community. I live in West Dennis now. I'm a resident and a homeowner. I've had the honor of serving the town of Dennis on the Zoning Board of Appeals, and I'm a small business owner. I've been growing a law practice for the past 8 years, fighting for people. And I'll fight for you. My service as a lawyer and on the zoning, solving problems and fighting for people has prepared me to do that for you. And that's what I want to do, and I appreciate the opportunity, and I ask for your vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Tim.
Thank you. My name's Tim Whelan, and I'm asking for your vote on Tuesday, November 4th. I sit here before you today as a man who defines himself by his family. I married my high school sweetheart, Lisa, over 24 years ago, and together we have raised 2 strong and successful daughters, Maggie and Katie. We started our married life as a young couple facing the struggles that so many working families here on Cape Cod fight every day. She has been a rock by my side since we first met, and I feel that together we can accomplish anything. I love my family, and my family loves me. I'm a very lucky man. I began a career that spanned several decades in public safety, first as a correctional officer, and then moving on to the Massachusetts State Police. My last assignment was a sergeant and shift commander at the barracks in South Yarmouth. I have also served our nation honorably as a United States Marine. We face many challenges in the coming years, and I firmly believe that I have the life experience to meet them head on. We have an addiction crisis here on Cape Cod, and I have spent my career on the front lines battling narcotic distribution and providing emergency first aid to those in overdose. We face concerns with education and education funding. I have long been involved in education as a loving husband of a career public school teacher and administrator, to being a parent of public school children, to working at the policy level as a member of the Governor's Task Force on School Safety and Security. And we need to redouble our efforts to support small business growth in our district and to provide new job opportunities for our residents. I have signed on to the Small Business Bill of Rights, and I will work tirelessly to improve our job market. I will be going to Beacon Hill with a lifetime of real-world experience behind me, and I believe that is essential to be effective in the complicated world that is Massachusetts politics. Please vote Tim Whelan for state representative so I can put my experience to work for you.
Well, earlier this year, the Cape Cod Young Professionals came out with a survey called Shape the Cape, which essentially found that there's been an exodus of Cape residents between the ages of 25 and 44. What specific steps would you take, if elected, to reverse that trend and retain those young people or even attract them onto the Cape?
Thank you, Ryan. That's a great question, and this is a question that's very near and dear to my heart because I'm living proof that you can live here, and I've grown a law practice for the past 8 years, and my friends are commercial fishermen. My hairdresser I went to grade school with, I've known since she was 5 years old. And there has been an exodus. I'm an active member of the Cape Cod Young Professionals, and I will be the best advocate to address this issue, and I can't wait to do that. And the avenue that they're pursuing right now is a fewfold. First of all, the issues are affordable housing and livable wages, and having jobs here year-round. It's a tourist-based economy, and we have to address those issues. So there's a few pilot programs that have started. One is a mentor program. There's a lot of opportunity for more intergenerational linkage. There's retired people who bring so many different things to the table from their different walks of life. And then there's young people who are eager and motivated. It's a matter of harnessing that energy, and I can do that. There's other programs. It's just in the forefront now to address affordable housing, and the people in this community are getting together and brainstorming ways to address that. I'm very optimistic about the future of the economy, and I think keeping the young people here is the key to it, and I think I'm the best person to tackle this challenge head on. Thank you.
Thank you. Tim?
This issue is near and dear to my heart as well, because I'm the father of 2 college-age daughters, Maggie and Katie, whom I mentioned earlier. And there's a very small likelihood that they will be able to live here on Cape Cod in the current state of affairs. I grew up in the city of Worcester, and I grew up down the street from my grandparents. And my grandparents brought such treasure and such joy to my life to have them near me. And it's wrong that the current state of affairs here on Cape Cod is going to limit my opportunity to live near my grandchildren. And how do we attack this? I believe that we've made a positive first step with all the work that Cape Cod Community College is doing, and now they're going to be working in concert with Bridgewater State University. So we have two superior places to offer higher education to our children. We also have to expand business opportunities here and support small business growth on the Cape. And the only way that you're going to do that I can see is to reduce some of the overburdening regulations on these businesses and promote their growth. Lastly, we do have to work with, as a state legislator, I will work with our local authorities to improve access and affordable housing for our young.
Thank you. Ryan, next question.
Thank you. The district you're seeking to represent has Dennis essentially at its heart. Earlier this year, the Cape Cod Commission had a big decision on its hands on a development that drew quite a bit of attention in that town. And this, of course, was over whether Lowe's would be permitted to set up shop. Going into that vote back in January, which, of course, was ultimately to reject Lowe's, how were you hoping the Commission would vote? And how does that position fit into your vision for what Cape Cod can and perhaps should be?
Tim?
Ryan, you get points for consistency. I sat a couple of days ago with the Cape Cod Times editorial board, and we had this exact same discussion, and my answer remains the same because I have a little bit of consistency as well. I'm not going to go there. I'm not going to look backward, and I'm going to look forward. That was and remains a divisive issue in the 1st Barnstable District. I want to get away from the divisiveness, and I want to move forward, and I believe the way to do that is to attract new employers to the Cape. And just as I addressed in my earlier, when I met with the editorial board a couple of days ago, and in my earlier answer, that's going to be priority 1. As your next state representative, I am going to work very hard to market the Cape and try and bring new employers and try and promote growth here of the businesses that we already have. And that's going to be our future. And I'm going forward, and I'm not looking in the rearview mirror.
Thank you. Elisa?
I do appreciate the question, Mr. Barber, and as I said last time you asked this question, thank you for bringing up one of the most controversial questions that comes to mind in the recent future, or recent past, rather. And what I say to that is that I support the Cape Cod Commission's decision. And the reason I say that is I think that we are fortunate to have the Cape Cod Commission, a group of intelligent, hardworking people who are dedicated to these regional issues and to address some of these issues that affect all of us that go beyond the town line. I don't see how we can without some input on the regional basis. And what I will say is they got a lot of information regarding how it's going to impact the traffic and the business and the economy. And and there were open hearings, and everyone had an opportunity to voice in. And they worked hard to arrive at that decision, and I respect that, and I support that. And so that's the answer to the question. I do support the Cape Cod Commission's decision on the Lowe's project.
Thank you. Ryan?
Sure. Now, again, Dennis, as I mentioned, does have a prominent role in the district. So does Yarmouth. The two towns, over time, have had a number of heated debate meetings. Elisa, one of your primary opponents, even characterized it as the Bass River School Wars because they were, in fact, so heated. What do you diagnose? What's your diagnosis for what the problem is there, and how, as a state representative, do you feel like you would be able to address it and perhaps make the budgeting for that regional school district go a little smoother?
Right.
Elisa?
I really respect and admire Representative Turner's involvement with the schools in general. I am really dedicated to education. I'm the daughter, the granddaughter, the sister of public school educators. I've been a lifetime learner, and I see it as a major priority of mine in the position that I'm seeking. And I admire how Representative Turner was at the school committee meetings and was meeting with the superintendent regularly. And I will do the same thing. I will be intimate in these decisions. But at the end of the day, it's the town, it's the finance and the school committee and the selectmen. They're the ones hashing it out. They're the ones with the information. Certainly, I will have my input and my advice and my guidance to offer them, but they're the ones making the decision. And I see, to some extent, my job as ruffling the feathers, because it's not a situation where you could really take one side over the other when both sides are part of your district. I do think, as a legislator, I would have to continue to be vigilant to educate the other legislators how unfair the school funding formula is to us on the Cape, who's a tourist-based economy, and if there is any change to the formula, to make sure that it doesn't hurt us, there's no further detriment to the educational funding.
Thank you. Tim?
I have a little bit of background personally in this issue. My wife Lisa served for 4 years as the principal at Station Ave Elementary School. So I'm very familiar with Superintendent Woodbury. We have a great relationship. I'm very close with every member of her admin team in the DY School District. And Lisa was the principal at Station Ave in 2008 when we had the big tent meeting. And oh boy, was that a lot of fun. What we're looking at here, it all boils down to funding. And so, of course, my first job as a state legislator is to get the resources and the funding needed to help avoid these conflicts between the towns that arise every time this issue comes up, which seems to be repeatedly. My other job is to foster cooperation between the towns and to serve as a resource for the school committee and the locally elected officials in the Board of Selectmen. How do I find the resources that we need? Well, I think that the first thing that we need to look at are new sources of funding. Representative Turner had told me once that revisiting Chapter 70, we have to approach that with trepidation because it could always be reworked in our detriment rather than in our favor. So some of those new sources of funding we can look at would be getting more funding into the regional school transportation budget, charter school reimbursements, or the circuit breaker accounts. But I'm going to keep on looking and I'm going to keep on digging.
Thank you. Next question. What would be your number one issue if elected, and possibly your number two issue? Tim?
With so many needs in the district, it's hard to say which will be number one and which will be number two. So how about if we say number one and two combined will be in no particular order? I believe that we have to look at what we just covered, which is the education funding. It's causing such a rift between Dennis and Yarmouth, and we cannot afford that. The last thing in the world that we need is are to have two towns in hostile relations with one another. And it does nothing to improve the education of the DY district, and the DY district has continued to shine despite all of that. All but one of their schools is in Category 1. So let's give them a round of applause. Another top issue to me is the opiate abuse issue that we have here on the Cape, and it's not just opiates, it's narcotic abuse and addiction in general. Addiction affects everybody. It affects all walks of life. It affects every demographic, every sex, every income level. It affects everybody, and I'll bet that most everybody here in the room has someone that they love and someone that they care about who's suffering from addiction of some form or another. And the state hasn't lived up to their responsibility to tackle addiction. I will.
Thank you. Elisa?
One of my priorities is keeping young people on the Cape. And this might be cheating, but I think that encompasses working towards affordable housing, economic development to make sure there's year-round livable wages, jobs available, and also that ties in with the drug epidemic. We need to start at the bottom and at the foundation, and make this a place that people could live year-round, and that's going to help the community as a whole. And I'm not looking at it from a perspective of just that there needs to be a priority over my generation, because the way I'm looking at it is looking out for the community as a whole. It's going to support the seniors and everyone else in this community if we could keep young people on the Cape. My second priority would be supporting the seniors. I recognize that a vast majority of the population here are retirees and seniors. A lot of them are on fixed incomes, and a lot of them really struggle with paying their real estate bills. And so one initiative that I would take is to address the tax circuit breaker and give them some tax relief on their real estate taxes by expanding that. I think that it hasn't been, the amount of money they receive as a tax credit has not kept up with how much their money they need for their basic living expenses. And we need to support our seniors. They're a viable part of this community, and I'll be a strong voice for them.
Thank you. Picking up on the issue of drugs, there's I'll read part of one question and a second part to this question. Given that most candidates support the effort to provide more rehabilitation and recovery services as opposed to incarceration, what will you specifically do as a representative to manage and ultimately solve this problem? That's the first question, so we'll start with Elisa.
Great question. I know this is a concern to everyone in this community, and it is to me as well. And I've seen it in my practice. I see it where people come into the court and they're petitioning to have their loved ones sectioned because they're afraid of what they'll do to themselves or others. And I've seen the lack of resources where sometimes I think this is telling, so I've said this a few times, but there's only one doctor in the southeastern regional part of the Cape that can do that evaluation, and a lot of times that doctor is not available. So the people cannot have the hearing, so they're they can't get the help they need. And then if the judge determines that the person does need treatment, sometimes there's not beds available and that person goes to jail. And that's someone who hasn't committed any crimes. So one thing that I'm doing specifically is I'm part of the drug awareness program. We've met twice now and it's up and coming, but it's such a step in the right direction that I'm excited to be part of it. We're reaching out to different people in the communities, the law enforcement, the healthcare providers, the court system, and at this point we're in the information gathering stages to find out what the common nucleus is and how to address it head on to get the horse before the cart, to save some of these kids, really. I think it is accountability and it's also recovery. It's a combination of both, but there does need to be more treatment, and I would be a fierce advocate to get more funding to get the necessary treatment.
Thank you. Tim.
Thank you. Having 30 years experience, close to 30 years experience serving in law enforcement, I have, shall we say, a little bit of background in the war on drugs. One of the last acts I was called on to do when I was serving with the state police was to hold a 30-year-old woman's airway open as she sat slumped in a taxi in overdose. And I held her airway open so she could breathe and waited for the Yarmouth Fire Department to arrive and revive her via use of Narcan. There is a drug abuse problem here on the Cape, and I've seen it firsthand through my work. And that's the problem. How do we find a solution? And I believe the solutions can be found by supporting District Attorney O'Keefe and the work that he's done with the drug court and expanding the breadth of the drug court and the reach of the drug court. I believe in looking at the recent change in legislation for 14 days of inpatient treatment coverage that insurance companies are mandated to provide, and maybe expanding that to 21, which I believe was in the Senate bill. I also want to look at and examine a little bit more that Sheriff Cummings has a program going on right now using Vivitrol. Vivitrol is proving to be much more effective than methadone in helping people in addiction recovery. So it's expensive, but how expensive is methadone? And lastly, we need to fund more beds in treatment facilities.
Thank you. And second part to this question, START, S-T-A-R-T, Students Achieving Recovery Together, would like to see a collegiate recovery program at the 4 Cs, this college, but there is no funding to build it. What would you do to work with us in achieving this goal? We'll start with Tim.
Now that's a fantastic question. Education is the key to success. And when you have people that are in recovery and they're seeking to better themselves through education, I will fight every day to get that program the resources that it needs. I can't think of anything better for them than for them to improve themselves through education and move on with their lives and become productive members of our society.
Thank you. Elisa.
It's inspiring to me that the question's even posed, because it means that people are thinking about what we can do about this problem and recognizing that there's not enough money to solve all the problems in this community. But what I'm optimistic about is that the problem has risen to the surface enough, and there's enough people looking to address it, that we can, working together, fund this program or volunteer or raising awareness. It's where there's a will, there's a way, and it's just a matter of harnessing the energy to the motivated people who are interested in solving the problem. And whatever I could do, I will, because I think this is an exact sample of something we need to do, and someone willing to make an initiative to start this. So this is a perfect example of something I'd be all hands on board with personally.
Thank you. Next question. Cleon Turner is retiring. What would you continue to do the same as he has been doing, and what would you do differently? We'll start with Elisa.
This is a great question. I've gotten to know Representative Turner the last 9 months so well, and what I respect and admire more than anything is, one, how committed he is to this community. Prior to being a rep, he was a police officer and he was a selectman. I can't think of a better example of a commitment to the community. And also, he's demonstrated how much value he sees in what he's done to bring the community together, working across party lines, being available, being open, having integrity, voting the way he sees fit, whether or not it's the popular decision. And these are traits about him that I admire. He's been working or meeting with me and serving as a mentor even, discussing a lot of the issues, and I'm so flattered and humbled that he believes that I'm the best one to fill his shoes and to continue on his good work for this community. I think he's been a stellar example, and we've been fortunate to have him. And I'm going to do my best to keep him involved, because I think we would all benefit from his involvement even after he's retired.
Thank you. Tim.
Representative Cleon Turner is not only my state representative, but he's also a personal friend, and I'm grateful to have him as a friend. What I would do that would mirror Representative Turner? Well, the first thing that I would do is one of the things that he's very celebrated for, and that is to read every bill. Read every bill. There's not enough of that going on in Beacon Hill, and I credit Representative Turner for doing that. And I will follow through with that because too much legislation passes through the State House without there being enough attention to the detail. And that does not happen in my office. I also credit him. His constituent service is exceptional. You talk to anybody in the district, and I've knocked on several thousand doors in this district, and Democrats, Republicans, unenrolleds alike all credit him for his responsiveness and his constituent service, and I will follow through with that because constituent service is the base of this office. It is the most important function. I also share his dedication to getting adequate school funding for our schools here on Cape Cod, and I give him great credit for being widely recognized as an authority on Chapter 70 school funding, and as your next state representative, I plan to tap into that knowledge that he's accrued over the years to help build better funding for our schools here on the Cape.
Thank you. Next question is about taxes. Do Massachusetts taxpayers deserve a graduated income tax? Tim.
I do not believe so. I believe right now Massachusetts taxpayers are overburdened as it is. If you look at what 8 years of one-party rule has done to this state and the increased taxes that we pay, we don't even need to have a discussion on a graduated tax. And it's not just the taxes, and we've seen our sales tax go up to 6.25%, go up 25%. We've seen the gas tax go up, and on question one, it will continue to spiral without any checks or balances unless we repeal it at the polls. We also have the backdoor taxes, the increases in fees. You look at the fees that affect every one of us. When you go to the registry to renew your driver's license, when you go to the registry to renew your registration, those fees have gone up as well. Where is all this money going? Well, I think we all kind of know the answer to that. It's not being spent wisely, and I will go up to Beacon Hill and I will be a steward of the public trust.
Elisa.
There's a lot of people in this district, in this community, on fixed incomes, and I'm cognizant of that. And any tax increase is going to can seriously affect people's individual lives. So any tax increase needs to be thoughtful, and it needs to be open dialogue to everyone who has something to say. And that I'm committed to doing that. I can't commit that I'll always agree with you, but I can commit that I'll always listen to you, because it's always a balance. There's certainly you can't say there's not going to be any tax increases, because we have. It's great to say how much you support education, how dedicated you are to it, but we need revenue to have good education and the services that our community depends on. So it's a constant balancing act, but I do think I will spend, or I will vote to spend taxpayers' money the way I would spend my own. And I'm a homeowner, I'm a business owner, I understand what it means to balance a budget and to be cognizant of expenses, and I will be thoughtful with every tax increase.
Thank you. Next question is on immigration. There's a couple here. How do you feel about undocumented immigrants and the fact that they are in our state? What is your opinion of the Trust Act with regards to this? And do you believe in granting driver's licenses to those in our country who are here illegally? And we'll start with Elisa.
Now, I've been waiting for this question for 9 months, and this is the first time it's come up, which is surprising to me, because it seems, I know it's a hot button issue here. And this is what I say about it. We're a country of immigrants. My grandparents came here from, great-grandparents, from Lithuania with a shirt on their back, and there's so many immigrants in this district alone. And I think that we need to secure the borders, and the immigration policy that we have now on the federal level has failed us. I'm as frustrated as all you are of how they haven't been able to come up with a comprehensive immigration policy. So we have undocumented immigrants here, and I see it in my work. And right now, as far as the driver's license issue is concerned, what we have in place now does not work. The truth of the matter is, immigrants are part of this community. They're a valuable part of this community, and whether they have driver's license or not, it's their livelihood. They have to provide for their family. They have to work, and they're here. And whether you agree that they're here or not, it's a reality of the situation. So I think And so I want the roads to be as safe as possible. People need to, if you give them driver's license, they'll be on the radar, they'll be registered, they'll be insured. And right now what happens is the case gets dismissed on a $100 court cost. And it's not a situation where you could take a hard line, because if we did want to take a hard line and say, oh, send them to jail, that'll get overturned. So I do think I would support giving driver's license for that reason.
Thank you. Tim?
I heard, Joan, and correct me if I'm wrong, there were basically two parts to the question. One was addressing the Trust Act, and the other one was addressing driver's licenses to undocumented immigrants. And,
That's correct.
Let me address both. The Trust Act was filed, it's legislation, I believe it was filed by Senator Jamie Eldridge from Acton, and it's called an act to restore a community's trust in law enforcement. As a career law enforcement officer, I never knew that we lost the trust of our communities, but this is how they word the bills up in Boston. And what it does is it would prohibit a police officer in Massachusetts from arresting an undocumented immigrant in this country if a federal warrant existed from ICE, a federal detainer. So this would be the first case that I'm ever aware of where a federal arrest warrant becomes unenforceable. And this isn't even going through the legislative process now. This is being promulgated by policy. So legislative process, be damned, full speed ahead with our plan. And that's wrong. The second is an act relative to safe driving. An act relative to safe driving would grant driver's licenses to undocumented immigrants. I oppose this. Why do I oppose it? I base it on my 30 years of experience in law enforcement, and I do not see we're granting illegal or people that are in this country illegally where that would improve safety on the roads. I just want the legislature to label their bills appropriately as a start. Thank you.
Thank you. The next one is on environment, and there are actually a couple of very similar questions, so I'm going to commingle them. And basically, they're asking about what would you do about the elimination of herbicides as a vegetation control method by the public utility company NSTAR, and how do you improve relationships between us and NSTAR and landowners? And we'll start with Tim.
And Joan, you forgive me, the first, because I didn't hear the beginning of it.
Yes, about using herbicides and eliminating vegetation by using these herbicides.
Sure. My understanding of the application of herbicides, and I have a gentleman on my staff who's here tonight who worked in the utilities for his entire career, is the application of the herbicides. It's direct application. It's not like they're flying over in a plane and they are dusting. We need to do something to keep the vegetation down so that when the wind blows, our power doesn't go out. We cannot have our cake and eat it too. We will need to have some method to reduce some of the foliage around the power lines, and I believe that it's just too labor intensive to do it by hand. Also, if we're going to talk about it from an environmental perspective, what does that do? What sort of a carbon footprint does it leave when we do it mechanically or manually? So I have no problem with using herbicides. I wish there was a better way. I wish I could wish those things away, but what we're left with is we have to remove those foliage one way or another.
Elisa.
I think that we can do better, and the environment is so crucial, not just to people who love the environment here, but also that retire here or come here for vacation. And I think that we have to explore other options besides using the herbicide, and keeping the environment a priority here on the Cape needs to stay that way for our, not just how we prefer it, but our economy as well.
Thank you. I know it's hard to just say yes or no, but there are a couple of questions here that I'd like to get through and just hear a simple yes or no. Do you support the ballot question 2, which would expand the bottle bill? We'll start with Elisa.
Yes.
Tim.
No.
You're quicker than I can write. Okay, next one. Do you support Cape Wind? Tim.
One-word answer only, right?
Right.
No.
Elisa?
I don't like this either, but no.
No, no, please. Get more done this way. Do you support the legalization of marijuana, Elisa?
That,
Yes or no?
yes.
Tim?
Quick note.
No, yes
No,
or no?
you're not
You can
allowed.
do a quick note at the next question.
Now you know what it's like to be a police officer on the stand. No, I oppose.
Thank you. Our young voters. What are your thoughts on young voters' apathy and civic engagement, and how will you work to curtail this? Tim?
I believe it begins in the home, and we have to, as politicians, as government, we need to connect more with families and parents and try and get them more involved, and through the parents, then we can get the children more involved. I also believe that government should be more involved, and not just in the policy level or the funding level, but I'd like to see government more involved in the schools with more civic education. And please rest assured that if I'm elected as your next representative, I will be active in the schools, and I will be active with our students to try and educate them and teach them about government, interest them in government, and get them involved in the process, because this is their country too.
Thank you. Elisa?
I've been meeting a lot of people, knocking on doors for 9 months now, and I will say it's promising since post-primary. There are more people in their 30s that seem to vote in the general election, because in my door knocking in the primary, I would say I could count on 2 hands the number of doors that I went to that were in their 30s. And so it's very clear to me that younger people are not engaged, and I think that it would be a perfect fit for me to be the one to say, come on, let's vote. And we've already done that with the Cape Cod Young Professionals last week. They had a register to vote thing set up, and I thought that was great. And I would be a voice for that. I think there's so much that goes right hand in hand with keeping them in here. We need to have roots, we need to have meaning and purpose to being engaged in this community. And a lot of them already are in other ways, starting businesses, running businesses, the fishermen, the landscapers, but being engaged in the municipal level and running for state rep when you're 34. I'll be a perfect example of how you can affect positive change for this community. I think the best is yet to come for Cape Cod.
Thank you. Next question on the minimum wage. What's your position on raising the minimum wage? Elisa?
Hasn't this already been addressed? I support it. I think there needs to, if you're working a full-time job for 40 hours a week and you can't afford your basic needs, there's a problem with the system. And I'm cognizant of the small businesses and the effect that it will have, and I think there's a way to be sensitive to the small businesses. I am a small business owner, I get it. And a lot of my friends and my colleagues are also. So in a way that's sensitive to the small business owners in this community, raising the minimum wage to a level that is necessary to have to meet your basic needs is reasonable, fair, it's the right thing to do, and I support it.
Tim?
Thank you for the question, Joan. My concerns with raising the minimum wage is I become very concerned whenever government inserts itself into a relationship between an employer and their employees. And while not stating a full opposition to raising the minimum wage, I also want to know where that compares to what's the hourly wage, what does it extrapolate to for members of our military serving and protecting our nation in harm's way. There's a move afoot right now to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour. That would mean that someone that's working in an entry-level job is earning more than a corporal in the United States Marine Corps serving over in El Anbar province, and that's wrong. I also am concerned because this just adds to the pile that our small businesses are dealing with. Right now, our small businesses who are trying to grow, trying to expand, trying to hire more people, trying to bring more jobs to Cape Cod, they're being hit with all at the same time the increase in the minimum wage, the expansion in the unemployment insurance and their costs there, the Affordable Care Act and other burdensome regulations. So they get hit with all this, and then we sit back as a government and wonder why the job market isn't growing or developing. And I think the answer is right before our eyes, and we just refuse to see it.
Thank you. Next question is about the bridge. What are your thoughts on the third bridge? Tim?
As a public safety professional who spent a portion of his career, I worked directly on the Cape Emergency Traffic Evacuation Plan. And it's not going to work with two bridges. If a Category 3 hurricane comes up the eastern seaboard, we're not all getting over the bridge and away from a tidal surge. So I view having a third bridge as providing another means of egress or escape from Cape Cod for life preservation. And in building that third bridge, I also recognize that the two bridges we have right now have some maintenance issues, so I think that it's forward-looking. But I say this with one caveat, one restriction. There will be no tolls on that bridge. The taxpayers of Cape Cod spent a lot of tax money to build a nice free ride for the citizens of Boston in their underground tunnel project with the Liberty Tunnel and the Ted Williams Tunnel, et cetera. And I believe that it's Boston's turn. They can build us a bridge without tolls.
Thank you. Elisa?
How do I feel about a third bridge? I've spoken to some of the Cape delegation about this, and it's really an issue we're dealing with right now. And I know all the legislators just met with the Department of Transportation a few days ago, and they're still coming up, they're still in the information gathering process, and I'm excited to learn more about the statistics with the effect that it's going to have on the congestion on the Cape and what effect it'll have on the environment and what the cost is really going to be and where this bridge is going to go. But it's speculative to me at this point, but it does concern me. I am cognizant of the fact that the bridges are 80 years old and something needs to be done, and I'm very open-minded to hearing the ideas, and I feel like we're very fortunate to have Senator Wolf and the representatives that are so dedicated to this community on board to help solve this problem. I want to be part of that discussion, but if I had to vote on it today with the information I have and the facts I have, I would be reluctant to support a third bridge.
Final question from the audience, and then I'll let you know of the question titles that we didn't get to. The final question is on the Pilgrim Nuclear Power Plant. In recent months, the public has become increasingly aware of the serious health, safety, and security risks involved in the continued operation of the plant. Do you believe it is now time to close the plant? And if elected, what would you do to help ensure that outcome? And we'll begin with Elisa.
Yes. The contract to renew that power plant should never have been allowed. It's not an issue of whether or not nuclear power is the way to go. It's a safety issue. The fact of the matter is this is one of the oldest plants in the country, and it's failing with regulations left and right, and that's concerning. Not only would I support closing it and as soon as possible, I think it's the people have spoken. The vast majority people on the Cape feel this way. So both as both in wearing the hat of representing the community and their wishes, and also my personal opinion on it. I've heard Senator Wolf speak many times about this, and what I admire about him is he's thoughtful with his opinions, and whether you agree with him or not, he does his homework and he thinks about it, and I've heard him speak a few times, and he makes very compelling arguments for why this plant should be closed and why, if there is a problem with it, it would be catastrophic and it would be at our expense. And I'm cognizant of the job losses for the people at the plant itself, and we'd have to be sensitive to things like that. But it is a liability, and it's our risk. And as a state rep, there would be limited things that I could do other than just working with the delegation and the federal level and the governor to put pressure on to have it closed.
Thank you. Tim.
Thank you. This harkens back to the question that I just answered when we were talking about the Cape Cod Emergency Traffic Evacuation Plan. And if there were an issue at Pilgrim, the evacuation from Cape Cod, if the evacuation zone were expanded to include Cape Cod, would have us leaving the warm zone, traveling through the hot zone, and going back into the warm zone. It's just not going to work. So I have very serious reservations regarding the nuclear power plant in Pilgrim. But as a state representative, I don't know that I possessed a singular authority to order it closed. I could certainly advocate to close that plant because it's over 40 years old. That plant is regulated by federal forces in the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. Then you have to ask yourself the next question, which is how do we replace the power production in the ISO grid? Now, some of the tactics that we've approached that with is through some of our energy conservation, and Mass Save is a great example of that. But again, we do need to look at closing Pilgrim. But between closing that as well as we've already closed a fossil fuel power plant in Salem. We're in the process of closing down the Moran power plant in Sandwich. And they're also closing down Brant Point in Somerset. What are we going to do for power production? Or are we all willing to withstand the rolling brownouts that will come during the summer?
Thank you. We're now going to have closing statements from the candidates, and we will begin with Tim.
Thank you very much, Joan. I want to thank the Cape Cod Times, Cape Cod Community College, the League of Women Voters, and everybody here in this room, and everybody watching and listening at home. Please continue to ask questions of your candidates in this race, and please demand answers. You deserve clear positions from us to help you decide on who you're going to vote for on November 4th. Before I begin a closing statement, I just want to call attention to one quick note, and that is that the month of October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month, but it's also Domestic Violence Awareness Month. Breast cancer has impacted so many families, including my own. My beautiful and dynamic wife, Lisa, as well as our daughters, Maggie and Katie, have a genetic predisposition to this disease, and they will have to carefully monitor themselves for the rest of their lives. Domestic violence affects all races, genders, income levels, and every other demographic imaginable. In my career, I've responded to domestic assaults as they occurred. I've used my own body to shield victims of domestic violence from their batterers. And I've arrested and prosecuted the perpetrators of horrific violence. And I've worked with social service agencies to help victims find support and get their lives back together. Through the fantastic work locally of organizations such as Independence House, Child and Family Services, and Children's Cove, among the many others, women and children in crisis are finding hope. Please support these fine organizations in their work. Friends, we have a decision to make on November 4th, and it is my hope that your decision will be to vote for a career state trooper and United States Marine who married his high school sweetheart and together raised a family here on Cape Cod. Experience is critically important in this race, and I am the candidate in this race with plenty of experience and a proven track record of decades of public service. My name is Tim Whelan, and I ask for your vote so that I can put my experience to work for you. Thank you.
Thank you. Elisa.
Thank you. I was raised here, I was educated here, I've grown my practice here. I'm so proud to be a Cape Codder, and I'm so optimistic about the future of Cape Cod. I've served on the Dennis Zoning Board of Appeals. I've helped people who want to make improvements to their house or grow their business. I've worked with them, recognizing the important balance in this community of economic development and environmental protection. I've been fighting for people through my work. I'm in court helping women who are victims of domestic violence apply for those restraining orders to get the protection they need. I've helped women who's get child support and filing the paperwork, and I've been a voice for women at organizations like We Can in Harwich, which I'm so proud to be part of. They help women obtain personal safety and financial security and independence. And I will be a strong voice for women and for everyone in this community. That's what I do. That's what I've been doing for 8 years, growing my law practice. My commitment to this community is deep and it's wide. And as a small business owner, I'm living proof that you can live here year-round. And I understand that being a small business owner, it's more complicated than just getting a paycheck at the end of the week. You need to worry about overhead expenses and balancing a budget and things like that. But I've been working hard for people in this community, solving problems and being a voice for people who don't have a voice. The Cape delegation is full of smart, intelligent, dedicated people, the majority of which has endorsed my candidacy. It would be my pleasure to serve with them and to serve you and to fight for you and your family in this community. And I'm the most prepared person to do this job, to pick up where Representative Turner has left off, and I'm so optimistic about what we can do here together. And I ask for your vote on November 4th. Thank you so much.